it's working. It says it's working. Right. We're live. Hello, Rabbi. How are you?
Hi, David. All right. Baruch Hashem. How are you? Missed you this week. I was away. Not you going away. You know, I've had it when people say I missed you. Like, I was here. Where were you? Do you know what I mean?
So you had it was a bar mitzvah, I think, right? And
external, yeah, but members bar mitzvah that was done externally.
Anyway, I'm glad it all went well. Right. So today we're here to talk about Simcha in a way, but we're also here to talk about celebrating things when things are difficult. So it sort of goes without saying, perhaps we don't say it enough, that we have some sort of an obligation through our religious practice to do things with joy, particularly when it comes to Yom Tov. And this isn't just something that we want to do; it's something that we're told we have to do. So we're going to bring up some of those quotes, and here you go. So you got
the top one is the one that I would really be looking at. The Samachta bechagecha, right? That's what you sing on Ve'samachta bechagecha ve'hayita asameach, right? You start, you should rejoice in your festival, then you finish off the verse with, and you should be only happy. So to have a Yom Tov like this is talking about, actually about Sukkos, by the way. This actual quote is a quote about Sukkos. And then if you look at it, the next one, mitzvah gedala lias besimcha, it's a great mitzvah to always be happy, right? I think we'll come back to some of the other ones afterwards. But I think the quotes that you're bringing over here, extremely important quotes, the quotes that really maybe frame the entire discussion and say, this is actually a discussion. Oh, whoops, exit full screen. Sorry. This is actually a discussion that needs to be understood in that context. We have an obligation to be happy. Every single person on Sukkot has an obligation to be happy. You have Rab Nachman says you have to rejoice. The Gemara tells us we should rejoice in the holiday. And yet, for many of us, we don't feel like it. And I would even go one step further, because I remember last year, I don't know about you, but I remember last year coming to shul on Shmini Atzeres morning. It was Simchas Torah in Eretz Yisrael. It was Shmini Atzeres by us. It was Shabbos morning. And I come to shul Shabbos morning, and Phil Morrison is doing security, and he says, Rabbi, it's terrible what's happening in Eretz Yisrael. And then I think he spoke about somewhere between 50 and 100 dead. And it was terrible. Even 50 to 100 dead is terrible. But I think as the day went on, and as the days actually went on, because this wasn't something that was finished in a day. It took a few days to ferret out all those guys. It took a few days to find everybody. And then when we finally did find them and finally got rid of them, hello, Adam Patrick. When we finally did get rid of them, it wasn't easy. You know, people lost their houses. People lost their lives. So I think it took a whole week probably for us to really understand the extent of October 7th. And it wasn't only October 7th, but that's the day that it started, but probably continued into at least till October 10th. So that today, as we come on to Simchas Torah, I think we understand much, much better what actually happened. And I think however little people wanted to celebrate last year, I think this year is certainly going to put a dampener on it.
I think that last year was just the emotions from that unfolded very slowly, because initially it's a massive shock, and there's a shock also at a time when you can't really necessarily get all the information that you want, because let's face it, the information just wasn't there for anybody. Even if you were watching it live on TV, people had no idea how this could happen. How it happened so quickly, how it took people by surprise, and then what was going to then unfold afterwards,
and the extent.
And
the extent of things,
and the extent of it, and how serious it was, and it sort of it built gradually. And I think for a lot of people, for Jewish people all around the world, but particularly us here in England, I suppose. We were intensely worried about what was happening out there. There were no answers. There was nobody coming to tell you, okay, don't worry about this. It's going to be okay. It was almost like we all watched a huge tragedy unfold. And I think because it was such a shock, and because nobody saw it coming, it hit everybody all more. We used to in certain, we can offer maybe a different perspective. Have a look at the events of this week,
Yeah.
and the sort of couple of weeks that they've had with the offensive with Lebanon. It's a different feeling altogether. It's not a feeling of surprise or weakness, or somebody caught you by accident when you were very vulnerable. It's the opposite way around. You are sort of proud, very proud of being able to defend yourself, and you feel that is that's the overriding emotion. It's one of deep sense of pride. I don't want to say happiness, because it's not, it's never, you should never really find joy in the death or destruction of other people. But we're talking about people who are our vowed enemies. But I think the feeling this time last year in October was really different, and it hit our confidence as a people massively.
Massively. It was a really, really rough patch. I mean, it's interesting what you mentioned over there, even in not being happy about the downfall of certain people. There's actually a huge discussion within the Gemara whether you're allowed to be happy about the downfall of Rishonim. For example, the Gemara tells us that the Malachim, the angels, wanted to sing Shira to Hashem. They wanted to sing song to HaKadosh Baruch Hu when the Egyptians drowned at the sea. And God said to them, Masa Yadai Tamim Hayam, my handiwork is drowning at the sea. How could you now say that we should actually sing about this? That just doesn't make any sense. On the other hand, the Jewish people did sing about it. We still say Az Yasher every single day to this, going through every single day at Shacharis. Why? Because we still sing about the fact that God saved us then. And I think whilst certainly I would, I am sad for some of the lives that were lost in Beirut, but I'm not sad for the life of Nasrallah. I think the man deserved what he got, and he deserved this years ago. And he's a man that's got bloods of thousands of people on his hands. And the world is a better place without an arch terrorist like him. And we will wait and see. I've not really heard that much comment yet. We'll wait and see. I mean, okay, we heard from Jeremy Corbyn. I think did you see Jeremy Corbyn's tweet?
I did not see that, no.
Somebody put it up on the WhatsApp, how Jeremy Corbyn is talking about how Israel's allowed to act with immunity or whatever. And then somebody wrote on top of it, sorry, Jeremy, for losing so many friends. Do you know what I mean? Like, that was the Douglas Murray's response to Jeremy Corbyn.
He's not very careful about the company he keeps. That was always his problem.
I think that was. But I think when you say we're not happy, I think that in a way, I think happy is the wrong word. But certainly there's a sense of relief for us as Jews to say that somebody who is such a terrible human being, who has created so much destruction and so much pain all around the world, has finally been taken out. And I think there are people all around the world that are breathing a sigh of relief and saying the world's a better place. Thank you, Israel, for having done that. And I would take it one step further, which I was discussing with someone today. If the West anyway had a chance at taking a pump at Putin and bringing out 200 or 300 people while they took him out, or taking a pump at Kim Jong-un and taking out 200 or 300 people while they took him out, I don't even think America would bat an eyelid or think twice. They'd just take him out. They would, because it would make their life so much easier. And yet, with the same story with Nasrallah, suddenly everybody looks towards Israel and goes, hey, look at that. There are innocent people that died with it. First of all, who knows how many of the people around him were innocent and how many were fighters? But
I think what's interesting is, though, it is very different, isn't it? To, I think we spoke about this before, that October the 7th came along and there was a different feeling. And it elicited that response of, okay, you're in shock and you feel crestfallen. And then I think, at least in the diaspora, it then gave birth to very strong feelings of pride and support, as we sort of, in this grief, we united, didn't we, to try and show the world that we were still here, and that, and you had those, they're not protest marches, they were just marches, weren't they?
Vigils.
So we had those vigils, and we had all these different events, and there's still people out there every week, every Sunday.
Just a quick unashamed plug for that. Anybody who would like to help Anthony Dennis and the Northwest Friends of Israel and all the others that stand outside Marks and Spencer. You can come out, was it 12 to 2 on a Sunday? You can come and you can hold up placards and you can fight against the haters. We certainly need to also look our haters in the face and say to them, we're not going anywhere.
And I think it's worth mentioning at this point as well that there's a bunch of memorial things going on the 6th and 7th of October next week.
So next week on the 6th, there's a big one in town at 11.
There is a huge one. Everybody should make the effort to go to. But
actually, maybe we should put up the poster. Do you have that poster? Actually,
I do have that.
Do you want to maybe just flash that up for a second?
I'll put that up in a few minutes. I'm going to get that up for you. But I think, if you look back through history, there was sort of the 1967 war, and you look at these things and they're almost spoken about in legendary terms, in terms of almost like open miracles happening, and the fact that we managed to defend ourselves against, even if you look at the Yom Kippur War, that wasn't a very positive point in our history at all, where they caught us by surprise. People still talk about it in revered terms, in terms of that we managed to get out of it. October the 7th was very different, but this week and last week, I don't know, for me, there was a little bit of this almost open miracles coming back again, because that level of intelligence and that level of what they managed to carry out,
the peepers and all that,
it is very, whichever side you're on, it's awesome in terms of you are awestruck by the power of what they were able to achieve so quickly. So I think your emotions go in this sort of little roller coaster, don't they?
They always do.
Up and down.
They always do. I think that's the normal graph for emotions. I think anybody who's got a graph going directly up, it's not healthy. There's something wrong with you. Anybody who's got a graph going directly down, certainly there's something really unhealthy going on over here. And I think normal people experience this ebb and rise of emotions. That's just normal. And I think that we have to be excited about the emotions that we have now. In a way, it might buoy us a little bit towards not coming up Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Simchas Torah, to feel that we've gotten rid of a lot of our enemies. But I still feel with all of that, there still be a pervasive sadness that says, but Simchas Torah will never be the same, or will it?
Well, that's it. So, I mean, it would start. We've had this discussion, and I think I counted the other day. I know you shouldn't count great things sometimes, but I counted, and we've roughly done about 72 episodes of Sunday Night Live since we started.
Have we really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And you're still not sick of me yet. But
I can't say it online,
But we've done a lot of these, and I think if you were to try and pick the one theme that runs throughout many of the questions that we've asked, and we've asked many different rhetorical questions out here in debate, it always comes back to, almost can be distilled down to, why do bad things happen to good people? That's what it always seems to sort of come back to. And in this case here, where we're talking about, can we ever celebrate Simchas Torah again in the same way? There must have been a ton of times in our history where celebrating Simchas Torah was so difficult. I mean, we only have to talk about the Second World War period to really appreciate that us having to celebrate Simchas Torah this year is going to be so difficult. But what must it have been like back then in the ghettos and in the camps? It's unthinkable.
It's unimaginable.
Yeah,
it's unimaginable. Because I think, again, I don't want to make light of October 7th, because I think October 7th was a very dark day in our history. Absolutely. But I think it almost pales in comparison to one day in Auschwitz. The amount of people that were hurt, that were maimed. At one point or another in Auschwitz, it was so efficient, they were killing 8,000 people a day. And that was Auschwitz alone. That was without all the other concentration camps. They had turned it into science. People would come, they were taking them to the gas chambers. They'd undress them, they'd gas them, they'd cremate them. Next set of people come. They would get 2, 3, 4 different deliveries of Jews every single day. By the time the Hungarian Jews were being killed, they had this down to an exact science. And again, it's nothing to be proud of, but on the other hand, is this the darkest day in Jewish history? I don't know if we can say necessarily it's the darkest day in Jewish history. Certainly the darkest day in Jewish history since the end of the Second World War. But I think that's how everybody's described it.
Undoubtedly, for all the reasons that we've already discussed. And so for me, I feel like we have a very common theme that has been running for 5,000 odd years. And that common theme is that to be Jewish is to be able to find joy in a dark world. I think if that's that, you can sum it up. That is the Jewish experience throughout time.
Absolutely. It's actually interesting because we were discussing it now and I just wrote it down. On Tisha B'Av, we actually have a kinnah, more than one kinnah, but if we say, it depends how many you say. But you have one of the kinnahs, one of the lamentations that we say deals with the Crusades. Now, the lamentations that we read about in the Crusades, the stories of the Crusades happened at the end of Iyar, and some of the stories of the Crusades actually happened on Shavuot. They happened on Shavuos. And yet, today, we celebrate Shavuos. Nobody has this marred Shavuos where they say, we can't celebrate Shavuos properly. Well, why not? About 1,000 years ago, during the Crusades, they attacked the city of, I'm not sure which one it was, whether it was Mainz or Speyer or Worms, one of the 3 cities, the 3 main cities that were in Germany at the time. They attacked them, they attacked the shul, and it was a terrible story. You speak about it in the Kinnah. The Kinnah says they came in the middle of saying Hallel. The bloodthirsty mob came in the middle of saying Hallel and just killed people indiscriminately. And yet here we are celebrating Shavuos, and chances are that most people listening to this broadcast didn't even know that such a massacre happened on Shavuos. To them, Shavuos is just another Yom Tov like any other Yom Tov. So I would venture to say that, of course, in the aftermath of October 7th, this year, next year, maybe in the years to come, it's going to be something that we're going to be thinking about. The real question is, and I, again, without trying to sound trite or trying to sound like somebody who doesn't care, will our children or our grandchildren even look back at October 7th, 2023 and say, oh, we need to dance Simchas Torah differently? Or will they say that's just another blip in Jewish history? And like you said, being a Jew is meant to bring light into very dark places. And it's meant to be that, we had to manage. You watch movies, my wife and my kids sort of rewatched Fiddler on the Roof in the summer. Have you ever watched Fiddler on the Roof?
One of my favorites.
Is it really?
Yeah,
absolutely. I don't know. I couldn't make it through. When I was a kid, I must say, when I was a kid, it was I wasn't into musicals. All the dancing and all the singing and everything, it just didn't do it for me. And now, I'm not going to listen to women singing, and I'm not going to actually watch it now. But I know the story, and the story it's a very interesting story. But you hear about the shtetl over there. The shtetl was actually a really horrible place to live. It was not a fun place to live. It's not something that we often have this very nostalgic view of the shtetl, but the shtetl is not like that. It wasn't a nice place, but you watch the Jews in the shtetl, and somehow the Jews in the shtetl, even though no matter how difficult it was, somehow they still managed to keep up and to be happy.
So I think you're right, and I think if you do watch Fiddler on the Roof, and if you can get past the cringe factor, which is sort of musicals give you anyway, because it's this Hollywood kind of Disney version of a shtetl, but there is that part in the film or the story where there is a pogrom, and the Cossacks come through and they're all drunk and they're doing what they do, and it's a far less graphic version actually than what would actually have happened back in the day. But those pogroms were not like, those were regular events, especially when you got to
Easter.
Events like New Year, their New Year, not our New Year. So that, what they would call Sylvester or whatever it was.
And Easter, they got riled up.
Yeah, it was like an excuse to have a pogrom, but they didn't need any excuse. But if you know, a lot of people talk about October the 7th as the biggest pogrom that ever happened since the Second World War. When you think about what happens in a pogrom and the violations that occur there, it's so far from Fiddler on the Roof. It's so debased and so serious, and it's something that we as a people had to live with as a fact of life. You had to, if you lived in the shtetl, if you were Jewish, that was going to happen. It wasn't an if, and it was a when.
Yep. And you live with your non-Jewish neighbors swearing at you and kicking you indiscriminately or doing stuff to you, and that was life. Life was that everybody around you hated you, and you just put your head down and you just tried as much as possible not to get into anybody's hair, and that was it. It's interesting. I wonder who Dan is, but it's correct. In the Nusach Ashkenaz Sidurim, and I think even in some of the United Synagogue Sidurim, the Av HaRachamim that we say is only said on Shabbos before Tisha B'Av and the one before Shavuot, because to commemorate the terrible things that happened during those. Oh, Danny Shintag. Hi, Danny. He's right. Absolutely, Danny. Right. I wasn't sure if it was Dan Sharp. I thought to myself that wasn't a comment I was expecting from Dan Sharp. It was too. It was something that had too much information. I wouldn't have thought that Dan Sharp would have known about this, about the Av HaRachamim. It makes sense that Danny is saying that. Absolutely, that's how they used to do it in the Av HaRachamim. That's what they used to do. They used to only say it in specific Shabbos because the Av HaRachamim is Yiskrei L'Kreva. We speak about Hasidim. We speak about all the people that got killed out. You know, the people that went through pogroms and people went through terrible things. And that's why we used to say it before the Shabbos, is because those were times where we really remembered these things. And so, but yeah, this was quite a normal occurrence in the shtetl. And for us, it's not normal. And so therefore, because for us it's so abnormal, you have one look at this and you say, my goodness. Okay? And we have to thank Hashem even for the fact that we live in a world today where October 7th took us by surprise and just absolutely rattled us. I wonder, and again, I'm just being hypothetical, not by trying to play down October 7th by it, but I wonder if October 7th had happened in Russia in the early 1900s, if the Jews would have just said pogroms as usual. If it wouldn't have even had anybody raising and batting an eyelid and just going, yeah, that's normal. But to us, that's not normal anymore. And because it's not normal, we look at it and we go, oh my goodness, how did this happen?
It's because you felt that you were secure, you were in your home,
yes,
and that your territory was secure, and the people that there were other people, frankly, looking out for you at the same time, or maybe even we told ourselves that we were looking out for each other when, and there were plenty of questions still to ask and still to answer about this, but clearly we didn't look after each other enough, or as well as we could have done on that day. So I think the shock of it is even because we're not used to pogroms, and because we've got we've got used to a sense of security. We've got used to being comfortable almost, that we never thought that this scale of tragedy could happen to us again. It's certainly not in Israel.
Yeah. But I think the other thing which has made this so much worse is a proliferation of social media and the fact that very, very graphic videos and content was available almost immediately on October 7th. See, when there was, God forbid, a pogrom in Russia in the days of old, if you lived in Bialystok and you found out about a pogrom that happened somewhere else,
it would have taken you weeks to find out.
It would take you weeks to find out. You wouldn't be able to see the extent of the devastation, and you'll just hear about it. Here, it wasn't just that we heard the devastation. People got to see real live footage of people being killed, of women lying there helpless, being dragged out into buses by masked people, about these terrorists coming through different gates of different moshavim, etc., etc. When you see these real videos, when you hear the screams and the real cries, it changes you.
It's terrifying. There was a documentary that the BBC had released this week, and despite it being on the BBC, it was still very good. were bits of it that they obviously did try to, I believe, in the making of it, they tried to censor some of it. But if you were to watch it, and it's not easy watching, people
I
shouldn't
don't
just
watch
be
these
so
things.
quick
I can't
to
hack it.
watch it. But a lot of people have. And everybody will tell you that it's the most harrowing, because you're right, you're seeing sort of, camera images, like we all take videos on our mobile phones these days. There's loads of them out there that were taken by the terrorists themselves, of
Yeah.
their handiwork, of what they were doing, because they were proud to be doing it, and they documented it. And it's horrific. And I think that I think you're right. We can spread fear and messages very, very quickly these days through the internet. My question to you is, can we spread joy in the same way?
I think we can. It's interesting. I'll give you an example of this, and I think it's a very beautiful example. And somebody created this. I don't even have the number for it, but I could probably get it for you. We could put it on. We could flash it on later. I'll just type while you're talking later. I'll do it on my WhatsApp. There is a WhatsApp status. It's called MKY, and MKY stands for Mi Ke'amcha Yisrael, who is like your nation Israel. And somebody put on this WhatsApp status, and they said the reason they created this WhatsApp status is because, I don't know how many of you use WhatsApp status or look at it, but a lot of people use it just to see other people, what's going on with other people. It's almost like the new form of Facebook, where you don't really have to have Facebook and nobody really sees or does see what
It's
you
a
see.
very from Facebook, I find the people that use it tend to be from within the more Haredi side of the community.
It is, because I think people sort of like, Facebook has become something that everyone says, ugh, I would never go on Facebook, but I watch somebody's status. I'm not sure why that's sort of so different, but be that as it may. So there was somebody said, everybody's status, this one's showing you this accident, this one's showing this stupid clip, and this one's showing you this thing that's gone wrong. And then at one point or another, somebody said, well, why not put out good things that happen? Why not put out positivity instead of negativity? And so somebody created this, what's called MKY, Mi Ke'amcha Yisrael, and it shows you where there's Achnasa Sefer Torah, where somebody has done a tremendous chesed, where Hatzal has come out. Things like that, some things that we can be really proud of. For example, in the summer, there was a young girl that went missing in some kind of national park somewhere in America, and it was dark and it was near impossible to find her. And hundreds of volunteers, hundreds of Frum volunteers showed up over there in this national park and just combed through the national park in the middle of the night to find this young child who got separated from her group. And Baruch Hashem, they did find this child, and the child was alive and well, and Baruch Hashem. And, you see then on this Mi Ke'amcha Yisrael, for example, you see the people showing up. You saw when they found them, you saw how they were dancing. Chaz de Hashem ki l'samra, the chesed of HaKadosh Baruch Hu never ends, ki l'chol rachma, his mercy never ends. And just to see that, when you're looking at all this nonsense and all this negativity and all this rubbish out there, it's so nice to have a status that actually gives you positivity and makes you feel good. We can spread positivity if that's what we choose to spread, rather than spreading negativity. I mean, one of the things that I don't like is, and I've seen this in a few different places, the people that create YouTube videos to show how nice they are.
Yeah.
Okay, like, you see this. I don't know if you've ever seen it. You have this video. I'm now going into a coffee shop. There's a homeless man outside. I'm going to be buying him a coffee in a Danish. Watch what happens when you give a homeless man a coffee in a Danish. The poor homeless guy is not your prop to get likes and clicks on WhatsApp or on Facebook.
You can't turn every homeless person into a social experiment for YouTube or whatever.
But people have done that, and I think that's horrible. I don't think that's spreading goodness. That's really being very egotistical, trying to get people to click and to like your thing, and you're using the poor homeless guy outside to buy him a coffee. You say, well, it was cheap. A coffee at Starbucks in the Danish is what, $6? For $6, I got 1 million views and 600,000 likes. That's fantastic. Yeah, but then you've used this guy. That's not spreading light. We want to spread light. You spread light properly.
So talking about spreading light then, and coming back to our original problem, and we've discussed this, and cards on the table time. This is transparent leadership from the shul. It is difficult to arrange Simchas Torah this year.
Very much so.
It's been difficult to decide, just because of the days that it falls on as well, but it's difficult to decide what it is that should happen. And we've had the dancing through the Tears initiative and all different things. And we've got the new Sefer Torah mantle that comes along as well, that has that's in memory of one of the victims there. And we're
Actually,
trying to keep
a family member of one of our
family
members.
member of I think he wouldn't mind us saying. So it's a family member of Rodney Barclay's.
Yes.
So we have a very strong personal shul connection
Uh-huh.
to this tragedy. And
I
so there's
actually
a
remember Rodney Barkley last year on Simchas Torah Comedy Main saying, you know what, they overran the Moshav where I have a cousin, and I just can't, I can't even think about dancing at the moment. And he turned around and he left. And that's fully understandable. Like, I didn't say, well, Ron, you have to stay here. Come on. Right?
Yeah.
I understand that. And in the end of the day, it turned out that this relative of his, they found that he had been killed. That's a terrible story. And so that's why, because it's a connection to the shul, we're doing that. And I think that's a very beautiful and important thing. But I've had a few other thoughts. And I'm throwing this thought out there. And maybe tell me if I'm wrong about this one. But I want to know, and I've not been to that many Simchas this year, but I want to ask you, I don't know if you've been to any Simchas, David. Have you been to any
Simchas? A wedding last week.
Really?
Yeah.
Whose wedding was that?
In fact, I'm missing one of the Sheva Brachos right now to do this. I went to the wedding of Jerry Huppert.
Oh, Jerry, of course.
And Emma, and it was a beautiful wedding.
Yeah.
It was different, very different. But go on, you asked what you were going to ask.
So my question is, have you been to any wedding in any part of society, whether you've been to a more religious wedding or bar mitzvah, or you've been to a more secular traditional wedding or bar mitzvah, that has been downplayed in any way because of October 7th? And I've not found that so much. And which is why my question really is, and this is, I know this is maybe a little bit hard or maybe a bit harsh, but why are we coming down so hard on Simchas Torah when all the weddings and all the bar mitzvahs in the past year have more or less looked the same as they've looked in the previous years?
Well, so I can only speak for the handful of Simchas that I've been to this year. But if we look at the wedding that I went to this last week, what I thought was particularly nice, and it actually took me by surprise, because much of the crowd there they weren't like me, if you like. So you would expect me to have very strong sort of Zionist beliefs and sympathies because of the type of Jew that I am. And sometimes when we look at more the Haredi side of the community, it's not as present. I mean, you certainly have support, but it's a very different kind of feeling. And what was very interesting was I snuck in. So I arrived late as usual, and I snuck into the chuppah. I had to jump over a wall, and I was there. And the bit that I came into was where Buchi Glick and the rest of his choir was stood. So everybody joked, "Are you coming to join the choir?" But as they did the brachas underneath the chuppah, they got to a point where they stopped, and Buchi sang very, very beautifully the prayer that we say every Shabbos for the soldiers.
That one.
That one.
I've heard him. He throws it in the middle of Yemeshkachech Yerushalayim. He weaves it in very nicely. He weaves
it in, and he wove it in so beautifully that everybody, I mean, literally, you were moved. Everybody was tearing up, and all the hairs on the back of your neck sort of stand up, because that is the right place to put it into any. If you're going to put it into a wedding, you're going to do it when you're talking about Yemeshkachech Yerushalayim. I think that's really, really important. But what I loved was that you couldn't hear a pin drop there when it was done. It was like everybody was absolutely. So I feel it elevated the simcha somehow. It made it was obviously a happy occasion. But what you're always saying at all these happy occasions, especially at that bit where you get to Yemeshkachech, what we're saying is, let's never forget that whilst we're enjoying a very happy, joyous occasion right now, there are other things that are going on, and that this isn't necessarily our constant reality. And I think that's Yeah, it was a beautiful moment. Beautiful
It's
moment.
interesting that you say that, because I think it's interesting that you mentioned that, because that really is what we always do. It's not a new thing for October 7th. It really is at every chasana, at every wedding, we always say, listen, yes, we're having a brilliant time at this wedding and we're going to dance, etc., but let's really focus on the fact that we're not back in Yerushalayim yet.
So let's have a look at Danny's answer to our question. So in response to the question of why we're focusing so much on changing this particular Simchas Torah experience, Danny said that in his opinion, firstly, because it's significant, it's the first yahrzeit of the events. Secondly, because Simchas Torah is the date of the start of the events themselves. So unlike weddings, which are scattered around during the year, this is sort of like, it's one of those watershed moments. It's a big day. It's a day that we're not going to forget.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that was the first question that I had, really, that I wrote down for myself. We discussed some of the things I've written down over here. We saw, we said that this is not the first time we've had this question. This is a question that's come up many times. And I think what we're going to try to do in our shul, and I think that is going to be the feeling around the world, is that we're going to try to keep perspective on the one hand, but on the other hand, we don't want Simchas Torah not to be a day of happiness, not to be a day where we say, you know what, we made it through this. See, one of the things that I was thinking about, at the end of Simchas Torah, you finish the Torah, and you know what we say? Chazak, chazak, v'nit chazek. Let's strengthen our strength, and we'll be strengthened through that. And I think that is really a feeling and a comment that I feel is so poignant. It's so significant for us at this point. Many of us could have just thrown in the towel. We could have said, okay, October 7th came, it's all over, Israel is finished. And I've heard a lot of people talk about this. And again, I don't know how to really react to the question of this, but lots of people say that this is Israel finding for its existence. This is an existential question, and the outcome of this war is literally the question of the existence of Israel or not. I don't know if that's 100% correct, but certainly the fact that to go through such an existential crisis for an entire year, and yet every shul around the world has still completed the cycle of the reading of the Torah, and every shul around the world, north, west, south, or east, will all be finishing the Torah and saying, Chazak, Chazak, V'nit Chazek. To me, is a very beautiful moment. I think to me, it's just as moving as you said. At the wedding, hearing on the one hand, during this great time of Simcha, we hear, here at this time where we're reminding ourselves of the first yahrzeit, so to speak, as Danny said, of these events, with it comes this feeling of Chazak, Chazak, V'nit Chazek. What we as Jewish people are able to do, the fact that we as Jewish people can go through a tragedy as terrible as what happened last year in Simchas Torah, keep going, and in spite of everything, the next year we have that again. So there's a very interesting story. I often think about this story. It's a story that they tell. I don't know where it's brought, but they tell a story about in the ghettos, in the concentration camp. One night they decided to put God on trial, and they had, I don't know why they did this in the barracks, but they had certain people that were on God's side and certain people that were the prosecutors against God and the defendants against God, and you had the judge. And people said, we're putting God on trial. God, we're here in this terrible place in Auschwitz. How could you do this? And the prosecutors went against God very, very strongly, and the defendants tried to defend God. And the end of everything, the judge came down and he said, we find God guilty. And then he said, okay, it's time for Mariv. And they all down Mariv. Right? And that final bit is the bit that I always found so amazing. Even after all is said and done, and even after we found God guilty, you know what we say? We still got an Mariv. And even if we look back, what do you think of that story? Have you heard that one before?
I have, yeah. So I've got a personal variation on that story. Just when I lived in Israel, I wanted to be a journalist, and my Ivrit
In
wasn't good
English or
enough
in
to.
Ivrit?
Yeah, well, English journalist actually. So the only
Jerusalem
newspaper at the
Post.
I need to apologize now to everybody, but the only newspaper at the time that was actually taking anybody in wasn't the Post. It was Haaretz, which is a
Mhm.
very left-wing
Very.
newspaper, and it had a very popular English sort of Anglophile bit, which we used to write. And my job wasn't very glamorous. It was just to read through the translations of all the Israeli articles because they were translated into English, and I needed to put them into flowing English.
Okay.
But on the nights
Some of the
where
mistakes, by the way, are always some of the mistakes from Hebrew to English. Some of these are just fantastic. I don't know if you've ever seen some things translated through
I've seen
Google.
some,
You've seen some
very
real
special,
crackers, right?
some real crackers. But on the nights, so what I wanted to say is that on the nights that you dealt with in those days when there was a pigua, see, we've forgotten this, and we should remember our generation's experience now of what a terrorist atrocity looks like has very much been sort of recarved into our memories by October the 7th. We think it's people coming to kidnap us. We think it's people that are coming to take us across a border and to violate us in that way. In the old days, what was
What
far
year
more
is this? Can you give context?
I would go, yeah. So it must be around sort of 2001.
So is that like the
2001.
Sabaro Pigua, for
Sabaro
example?
Pigua. So
That
there
was
were
a very famous
explosions
one.
happening in pizza places, in restaurants, very often on buses.
Yes.
So these days
And
there's a
number
lot
two
of
bus also in that time. I remember those Piguim.
loads.
I lived in Israel at the time.
Loads, and there was a spate of them. So on the evenings that used to happen, it was a horrible, horrible process that you had to go through because you had to guess first of all who did it because nobody owns up straight away. So the newspaper writers start to write about, well, maybe it's Hamas, or maybe it's Islamic Jihad, or
Maybe
maybe
it's
it's this, or
Hezbollah.
maybe it's that. And then you get the details of the victims coming in, and you need to work out who these people are, and they all have families. So a lot of the families haven't even found out, but the press are you have a great
And
responsibility.
you're not allowed to print anything before they found out, are you?
It was a very, very horrific process for this guy who was there just to check that the commas were in the right place and that nobody had misspelled any words. All of a sudden, you're dealing with all of this detail, and when you leave the newspaper goes to print at about sort of 12, half 12 every night. And then that's it. You can't do any more. You've done everything that you can do. It's in black and white. It's gone, and anything else you're going to have to correct the next day. But you can leave feeling very dejected if you've had to deal with the personal experiences and details of children, of women, of men, of innocent people who've been through such horrible things, and you've had to write about it almost dispassionately, like it's not, like you're not affected by it. And at the end of every night, the only perk that came with the job was that you got a taxi ride home included with so you didn't have to go on a bus, you could get in a taxi. And I get into the taxi, and this taxi driver, you know what Israeli taxi drivers are like. They can't stand it if you don't talk to them, right? They can't stand it. And I got in there, and I was tired. I was depressed. I'd been dealing with this bombing all day. And the taxi driver sort of goes to me, "No, what's going on?" And I'm like, "Have you not heard the news today? It's like it's awful what we've had to deal with tonight." And he says, "Yeah, okay, it's awful, but this is I'm gonna have to get up tomorrow morning, go to work, and pay my mortgage." That's what he said to me. He said, "This is life. We need to carry on. We need to get going." And I'll never forget that a couple of days before that day, I had burnt my thumb doing something. So I had a bandage on my thumb. He said to me, "What have you done to your thumb?" I said, "I burnt it on an iron or whatever it was." So he said, "Let me see it." I'm like, "What, are you a doctor?" He goes, "No, but my wife works at the hospital." So from the car, he called his wife who works in the hospital. She's in the middle of her shift at the hospital. And she's asking him, so tell me, what does it look like? Does it hurt when you touch it? Has it got a blister? And this woman was diagnosing me over the phone through the taxi driver, telling me what I should be doing with my thumb. And at the end of it, she said, and what are you doing for Shabbos? And I got an invite for Friday night dinner as well. And I guess what I take away from that experience is that you can be as depressed as you want, but there are people out there who it is their daily existence. They need to, they cannot get up and go to work in the morning if all they're ever going to be is utterly depressed and downfallen about it. But in that particular story, you also see this connection that we have as Jews that just doesn't happen anywhere else.
No.
Because you get into a taxi, the guy tries to wind you up, tries to talk to you. He ends up giving you medical advice over the phone, and you end up going to them for Shabbat. And
Did you actually go?
Today. So you end up extending your network and your family, and it's how we are as people.
Did you
and
go for Shabbos?
That joy and that love has to fill the vacuum of the hate and the violence that we have. And to me, that night will always stand in my memory of that's the yin and the yang of life in Israel almost.
Did you actually go for Shabbos then?
Yeah. Well, I never turned down an invite for Shabbos. But it's crazy. So, you never know who you're going to end up talking to. And a few weeks later, I come back home for Pesach to Manchester. I get in a taxi at Manchester Airport, and the driver doesn't say a word to me for 30 minutes all the way home. And I'm itching to have a conversation with this guy. So, but it's just a different way of life, and we're just different people. There's something in our programming that says we're not going to let this destroy us. We need to have it carry on, and we need to, and that taxi driver kind of taught me that lesson.
It's amazing. It's amazing that modern, that he says, and I think people who listen to this might be a little bit put out by the fact that this taxi driver said, so what? I still need to pay my mortgage. I don't think he was being callous. I don't think the point was that he didn't care. I don't think that was the point, because you can see from the fact that he invited you for Shabbos that he cared deeply about Jewish people.
I think what he was trying to tell me was, and I think this was his point, is that life is going to have to carry on, and you're going to have to carry on as well. So your work involves, like he was trying to explain to me, your work involves dealing with the details of victims, and it's very difficult, but it's very important work that you do. So you have to carry it on. And I need to carry on because I've got a family to feed as well. Life carries on. If you cannot afford to put it on pause or just to stop. And a lot of this year's story is about trying to return us back to, well, I say normal. We're never going to be normal again. But, if you have a look at what's happening in Israel, what's happened over the last 2 weeks is to return 80,000 families who have been displaced and living in temporary hotels in the north of the country. Can they go home for Yom Tov? Simple things that we take for granted. So I think that's the message that I take from that particular guy in that particular episode.
I think it's a very beautiful message, is that the fact that, this idea of keeping going, and, that being the message of Simchas Torah, chazak, chazak, v'nis chazek. One of the other things that I really feel is very beautiful, and I think we're going to be making a very big focus on, is the idea of the children in shul, kol ha'na'arim, and that the final aliyah, just before Chosin Torah, we call up all the kids with somebody. And by us, especially in our shul, where we have so many kids, we have so many younger children and slightly older children that are coming in, that are getting involved in the program, et cetera, having so many kids in shul on a week-to-week basis. And I love having it. One of the saddest things my wife always tells me, she said that in COVID, when we had a very, very, very small Simchas Torah, that we had, and she said literally, when they called up Kol HaNa'arim, it was one of my children, and I think one of Adam Kaplan's children, and that was it. There's 2 children. And she said Sharon Hood held on to her, and she held on to Sharon Hood, and they just stood there and cried. Because the year before, we had 70 children, 80 children, 100 children. Now there's 2. But now we're back in 2024. Mitzvah Hashem will be back to a full shul, full of kids, shul vibrancy. There's going to be this loud noise that's going to be with all the kids that come in, and they're going to be singing together, hopefully in shul as well. Acheinu and Mishaberach, etc., etc. Different songs they're going to be singing together with us to get us in the mood. But to feel that we have children that continue on, and that our pride is to bring our children to shul and Simchas Torah and to have them finish a Torah. Not to dream of growing up shooting people, not to dream of growing up and blowing people up or being a terrorist. When I grow up, and I'm sure you've seen some of these videos, they're harrowing when you see the way these little kids have been brainwashed. What do you want to be when you grow up? I want to be a martyr. I'm going to kill Jews. Well, ask a Jewish child, what do you want to be when you grow up? I want to make a difference to the world. If you teach your children correctly, I want to grow up. I want to be a good Jew. I want to make a difference to this world. I want to really, and to understand that and to see Simchas Torah like that. And after all that has happened, after all of the hatred this year, and after all that we've gone through this year, to come to Simchas Torah and to stand there with the children and to be able to celebrate it with the children and them to be able to make the bracha on the Torah and for us to celebrate and to sing Amalach HaGol Osi and the Chazal on Arm, it's just, to me, I think it's going to be a very, very special moment. And I think it's another thing that we need to celebrate as we come. And we say, how do you move forward? One of the ways to move forward is to say what is happening with our younger generation. The fact that we have a younger generation and the fact that younger generation wants to follow in our footsteps and that you have young people that are still coming to Shul and Simchas Torah and making a bracha on a Sefer Torah is in of itself already another reason to celebrate.
She's had a message from Sharon Hood that she's watching. She said she still cries every year, but now with joy.
Really?
Yeah.
Very beautiful. Because my wife, there's so many times, I know Sharon feels the same way. There's so many, my wife has told me so many times, she said, standing there, that Simchas Torah and looking at that, she said it felt literally like post-Holocaust. Post-Holocaust, one of the things that people said is that there were no children around. There was no children. And people had to rebuild and children had to be reborn. But all the children had been killed out and taken away. And you went to a shul and you had one or two kids and it was like, wow, look, a child. And today we're not so excited about having kids in shul. Some people actually think they make too much noise and they're constantly looking for sweets and they're running around.
No. It's the right place. We're very happy to have them in our shul.
It's
amazing. And when I look at have to pay tribute to the great work of Sarah Bergash and the youth team.
And those who came before, by the way, as well.
And all the people
and Mikey and Rivka and all the
Adi, but what these people do and what is not just sort of keep shul interesting and relevant for children and young families, but it's like a vital part of their, in some cases, vital part of their Jewish experience, vital part of their Jewish education as well.
Definitely.
And it's something that we're all immensely proud of.
100%.
And yeah, it's just superb.
And I think for me, in the shadow of the tragedy, that's going to be a very special moment. To look at that, I hope in Mitzvah Hashem, we had the plan that they were going to be singing these songs, and I hope that that's still going ahead. And I think to me, the children are going to be singing Acheinu all together. I think that's going to be a very, very special moment. To stand there after we're basically about to finish the Sefer Torah, a year after what has happened to us, having gone through a year of this terrible pogrom, the anti-Semitism, the war in Israel, the war in the north, everything that's going on, and with all that, to have kids standing in front of a Sefer Torah and making a bracha and singing Acheinu is, to me, it's one of the greatest testaments of the Jewish people.
I think we're all going to be joining Sharon this year. There won't be a dry eye in the house.
Absolutely. I think she's absolutely right in that. And to see that, I think it's going to. I just think it's so important. It's so important for us to not only focus on the tragedy, but for us really to be able to say tragic things have happened to the Jewish people and they happened to the Jewish people all along. But I think you showed me a quote before about Rabbi Sachs. It's about being a Jew. Do you want to pull that one up?
I'm gonna pop that up. So we had some some quotes. So these are different. I'll go through them. So you've got the Lubavitcher Rebbe, darkness is not chased away by sticks, but by light. In other words, to eliminate negativity is to focus on creating positivity and light.
And
Right?
Lubavitch has always been very, very good at that.
Always done that. Shimshon Raphael Hirsch, the history of the Jewish people is like a symphony with moments of harmony and dissonance, but always moving towards a crescendo of hope. And then we have, so you've got two very well-known quotes at the top there, including Rabbi Nachman's "The world is a very narrow bridge." That's another song that we're going to end up singing, I think.
I'm
right?
sure.
Okay, and then you've got the late Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sacks. To be a Jew is to be an agent of hope in a world serially threatened by despair. Every ritual, every mitzvah, every syllable of prayer is a protest against escapism, resignation, or the refusal to hope. That's some intensely powerful and beautiful words.
Yeah,
right?
I mean, Rabbi Sacks was a wordsmith of like unreal proportions.
We not only lost a spiritual leader, we lost a poet. Really, we did.
This is really poetic, isn't it? Every ritual, every mitzvah, every syllable of prayer is a protest against escapism, resignation, or the refusal to hope. That's amazing. You know, but it's true. To be a Jew is to be an agent of hope in a world serially threatened by despair. And really, our world, we could go into despair as Jewish people. Actually, if you want to look at one people and you can say to yourself, these are the people that should have the most despair in the world, it's us as Jews. We've been hated by everyone. We've been kicked out of everywhere. We've been killed and we've been maimed and we've been pogromed and et cetera, et cetera. You know, you think about it. Today, you look at people and people go to mental health professionals, et cetera, et cetera. It's surprising that the entire Jewish people is not one big basket case. With our history, that's really what we should all be. Should all be one big basket case. And yet,
if you look at Jewish neuroses, I think there's plenty of evidence out there that we channel it in different ways. And seriously though, if you look at how we look after our children, how we always are trying to sort of, we have a plan B for everything. We're backing up everything. We think it's important they should have education. We think these values don't just come out of nowhere. They come out of an imperative to survive and lessons that you learn from history along the way. And even the way we feed our children and the way that we love them, it comes that, this post-Holocaust kind of generation had all that anxiety, maybe that they passed on nicely to their kids through the way that they were raised. And I believe that we keep doing it generation after generation in our own way. Yeah.
But look, if you looked at the Holocaust grandmother, they all said the same thing. SS, mein Kind. Keep eating. And that was a love that they were showing to their children because they didn't have food. They grew up in a time where all the food was taken away from them, where things were difficult. And the greatest blessing was to have food. And so now that they had plenty of food, I remember my grandparents, my grandmother and grandfather lived with their daughter. I had a single auntie who unfortunately passed away a year and a half ago. But she lived with my grandparents. They had a freezer full of meat. There were 3 people. They had enough meat in there to feed the entire shul for 3 Shabbos. And yet every week they went in and bought more stuff. And you're like, did you see how much stuff you have in the freezer? And they always felt like we didn't have enough. But that was this Holocaust thing. These neuroses.
I'm laughing. I'm only laughing because in my profession, I have the rare privilege of going into more kitchens than you've had hot dinners, right? And when I go in to a Jewish house, they not only show me, I want to show you, we've got a milky dishwasher, we've got a meaty dishwasher, and here's our fridge, and here's our freezer. They take me into at least 2 other rooms where there's other freezers there. If you haven't got 2 extra freezers, you ain't Jewish in my book.
Yeah, no, not really. But that's what it is. But being the agents, because it's amazing that we as a Jewish people still survive and still thrive. And I think it's because, like Rabbi Isaac said, being agents of hope, being people that try to infuse ourselves with hope. And we say, yesterday might have been a difficult day, but tomorrow will be a better day. And being able to look at the world like that and being able to try and move on from all these things is what makes us into the people that we are. And so therefore, I think Simchas Torah, yes, Simchas Torah was a terrible tragedy, and I'm not downplaying it for 1 minute. Please, I want to put it on the record. I want to be very, very straight. We're not downplaying what happened last year, Simchas Torah and Shmini Atzeres. It was terrible and will remain etched in our nation's history forever. But being agents of hope and understanding that if we dampen our spirit on Simchas Torah, they've had a partial victory, because that's really what terror is trying to do. Terror is trying to do exactly that. Strike terror in the hearts of people. People don't want to leave their house. What's going to happen? People don't want to mingle. What will be? And we need to fight against that terror. And one of the greatest ways to fight against terror is with happiness, is by showing up on Simchas Torah and saying, last year you had a terrible blow to the Jewish people, and we're still reeling from that. But with that, we can still dance. With all of that, we can still hold a Sefer Torah. And I think, and this is very, very important for us to know, is that Yiddishkeit is not a one-way street. We actually have the ability to feel more than one emotion. My mother loves telling this story. She says that she once brought a friend of hers to a chuppah, and she said, "You are the most schizophrenic people I've ever met." That's what her friend said to her, a non-Jewish friend. She says, what do you mean? She says, you go to a chuppah, and there's this very mellow music, and the chosn walks down, and the kala walks down, and everyone's crying, and they're going around, and the mother, the bride, and everyone's dabbing their eyes, and everyone's, and they have this ceremony in the ring, and it's all solemn and everything. And suddenly the guy goes, bang! And you bang onto the cup, and everyone goes, oh, the place goes. She says, like, what in the world just happened? Some guy just stepped on the glass, and the place went mental, absolutely mental. And the capacity that we have within ourselves to be on a chuppah and to feel the intense emotions of the moment of the chasana, and yet to feel the intense simcha a second later, shows that we actually have the ability to be able to feel all of these things. And if we have the ability to feel all these things, I think this year Simchas Torah is going to be the time we're going to have to be able to feel all these things. It's going to be a time of tremendous dancing. It's going to be a time of tremendous thought and introspection as well. And one of the things that we did last year, and I think we should do again this year, is maybe, there's certain things that are part of Simchas Torah, certain things don't need to be part of Simchas Torah. Drinking, it's fun, all right. It's part of Simchas Torah.
Yeah.
But have a few l'chaims less. You don't need to get sloshed. You don't need to run around and say stupid things. It is a solemn day. Dancing, you should try to dance anyway, right? Because that's really part of what Simchas Torah is all about. And when you can feel those emotions, you can feel the happiness on the one hand, and you can feel the solemn experience on the other hand, and try to merge those two things into a beautiful experience, I think that this year's Simchas Torah might actually be one of the most meaningful Simchas Torahs we've ever had, rather than being a Simchas Torah everybody goes like, I don't get it.
When you think about it, we owe it. We owe it to the people that lost their lives. We owe it to the countless. I mean, we're not even we're talking about October the 7th, but the soldiers
100%
that have been fighting all year, the sacrifices those families have had to make as well, sending their boys away and their girls away, and not knowing if they're going to come home. It's all for nothing if you can't live your Jewish life in freedom, because that's what they're fighting for. And we owe it to them. We owe it to them to keep our traditions going. Otherwise, what's it all for?
100%. So I think this year's Simchas Torah will be very different, but I do hope Simchas Torah this year will be very special all around the world. That people that after Yontif will suddenly get in touch and say, it was very emotional, but was very special. And we thought Simchas Torah will be canceled, and Simchas Torah is not getting canceled at all. It's going to be special. It's going to be moving. It's going to be different. It's going to be slightly less levity, but certainly I think much more meaningful. And as you said, we owe it to everybody out there, those who gave their lives, those who are putting their lives on the line at the moment. And for all of us as Chai Yisrael, we owe it to say, Am Yisrael Chai, we keep going, maybe with less, as we said, with less levity, with a little bit less happiness, but not to give up. and not to give in. We're still here to tell the tale, and we continue to stay here to always tell the tale.
Well, Rabbi, on that beautiful note, I'd like to thank you, but I'm also going to do a little bit of housekeeping. So I just want to remind everybody that's watching that on the first day of Rosh Hashanah, around Musaf time, we've got an explanatory service going on in the parallel.
As well as Yom Kippur.
As well as Yom Kippur as well. So if you want to come to shul and understand what the Machzor is saying, and to perhaps have a different insight into the service, then we will be running that as well. So it's going to be a very interesting year this year, because we're doing things slightly differently in a new and improved fashion. I think we're together again for Kol Nidre as a whole shul, which I know you and I. We shouldn't say this because he can't answer back, but you and I have always been very big fans of that. There's something very special when the whole shul comes together for something. Last year,
by the way, last year's Ne'ilah, do you know how many people, a lot of the parallel service people came to me afterwards and said, I wasn't sure, I was a little bit skeptical about this, but this was by far the best Ne'ilah we've ever had. It was a very special
Yom Kippur, it doesn't matter whether one service finishes before the other. Where are you running to already, right?
Food.
There's nothing to eat. Stay in shul. And we promised we'd make the details available. But next week on October the 6th, starting 11 a.m. from St. Anne's Square, concluding at St. Peter's Square, the speeches and remembrance is going to be a very well policed event, and hopefully a very peaceful event as well. But it's important that you show your support. And I know that the entire community is going to make a massive effort to be out there on that day. Rabbi, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good week. I feel like we are actually set up to have a good, to have a positive Simchas Torah that is going to be different. And we'll see you all very soon.
Can I make just one last comment before we finish with that? So we did these three now in Elul, and was really, it was nice. It brought me back to the time. If there are people out there that would like us to continue this, maybe even as a format once a month or something like that, if you have ideas of people you want us to speak to, or people that are topics, please get in touch. Otherwise, maybe we'll shelve this again until next year. Elul, it really is, it's up to you. We'd be very happy to keep this going. If there is a bikush, if there's actually a want and demand for it, David and I will be very happy to continue this. So please let us know your thoughts, whether you watched this live or whether you watched it later and you'd like to catch up, but just get in touch with us and let's see if we can keep this going, if it's something that people would like to watch.
I agree with that. We only need one person to say that they want it, right?
That's me.
No. We will see you all. Have a great Yom Tov, everybody.
Take care. See you. Shana Tova.